Hey there, restless minds and curious souls. Tonight, we're diving into something that might surprise you about your own body. Right now, as you're lying there trying to quiet those racing thoughts, your body is carrying around biological leftovers from millions of years ago. Parts that once helped your ancestors survive, but now just exist, quietly tucked away like forgotten heirlooms in an evolutionary attic. Think about it. You brush your teeth around, wisdom teeth that don't fit in your mouth. You get goosebumps from tiny muscles trying to fluff fur you don't have. You carry an appendix that serves no purpose except occasionally threatening to kill you. Your body is a living museum of evolutionary history, complete with exhibits that no longer work. Before we begin this gentle journey through your biological past, take a moment to like this video if you find these evolutionary mysteries as fascinating as I do. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from tonight and what usually keeps you awake. There's something oddly comforting about knowing we're all here together, carrying around the same useless parts, all slowly evolving into whatever comes next. So settle in, dim those lights, maybe adjust that pillow one more time. Tonight, we're going to explore 15 beautifully useless parts of yourself that evolution simply forgot to edit out. Think of it as a guided tour through your own body's history, where every vestigial organ and forgotten muscle tells a story about where we came from and reminds us that even in our imperfection, we're all perfectly, wonderfully human. Let's start with the most famous evolutionary leftover of all, sitting quietly in your abdomen right now, occasionally plotting your demise. Right now, tucked away in the lower right side of your abdomen, sits a small, finger-like pouch that serves absolutely no purpose in your daily life. Yet this tiny organ, your appendix, has probably crossed your mind at least once, usually accompanied by the uncomfortable thought that it might randomly decide to try to kill you someday. Welcome to the world of vestigial organs, where evolution's leftovers can still ruin your weekend. The appendix is perhaps the most famous useless body part, and for good reason. This 3.5-inch tube dangles from your large intestine like a biological afterthought, doing essentially nothing except occasionally becoming inflamed, infected, and potentially fatal. It's the poster child for evolutionary leftovers, a reminder that natural selection doesn't always clean house as efficiently as we might expect. Your appendix tells the story of a very different human ancestor. Millions of years ago, our predecessors were herbivores with much longer digestive tracts and larger cecums. The part of the intestine where your appendix now hangs. Back then, the appendix was actually a functional part of a longer, more robust cecum designed to break down tough plant matter, particularly cellulose from leaves, bark, and fibrous vegetation. Think of it as an extra fermentation chamber, like the specialized stomachs that cows and other ruminants use today. But as our ancestors evolved, developing larger brains and discovering fire, our diets shifted dramatically. Cooked food was easier to digest. Meat became a regular part of our meals. Our digestive systems began to shrink and streamline. The large cecum our ancestors needed became smaller and smaller until all that remained was this tiny appendage, a biological fossil of our herbivorous past. Here's where the appendix gets interesting, and by interesting, I mean potentially murderous. In modern humans, appendicitis strikes about 7% of the population at some point in their lives. That might not sound like much, but consider this. Before modern surgery, appendicitis was often fatal. Even today, a ruptured appendix can lead to peritonitis, sepsis, and death if not treated quickly. So, we're carrying around an organ that serves no function but can still kill us through no fault of our own. The symptoms start innocuously enough. A dull ache around your belly button that gradually moves to your lower right side. Maybe some nausea, a low fever, loss of appetite. Your body is essentially staging a small rebellion in a part of itself that shouldn't even exist anymore. The appendix becomes inflamed, swells up, and if left untreated, can burst like a tiny biological grenade, spilling infected material throughout your abdominal cavity. What makes appendicitis particularly cruel is its randomness. You can be perfectly healthy, living your life, and suddenly this vestigial organ decides it's had enough. There's no prevention, no lifestyle change that eliminates the risk. It's pure evolutionary bad luck, carrying around biological baggage that can turn against you without warning. Some researchers have tried to find a modern purpose for the appendix, suggesting it might serve as a reservoir for beneficial gut bacteria or play a minor role in immune function. These theories have some merit, but the evidence remains weak. Even if the appendix does provide some small benefit, millions of people live perfectly healthy lives after having it removed, with no apparent ill effects. It's hard to argue that an organ is essential when its absence causes no problems whatsoever. The medical approach to the appendix reflects our ambivalence about this useless organ. Unlike other vestigial parts that we simply ignore, the appendix demands attention because of its potential for causing serious problems. Some surgeons have advocated for prophylactic appendectomy, removing healthy appendices during other abdominal surgeries just to eliminate future risk. But most medical professionals consider this unnecessary, preferring to wait and see if the appendix actually becomes problematic. There's something almost poetic about the appendix's existence in our bodies. Here we are, the dominant species on the planet, capable of splitting atoms and sending robots to Mars. Yet we're still carrying around a piece of evolutionary history that occasionally tries to kill us. It's a humbling reminder that evolution doesn't design organisms for perfection. It simply tinkers with what already exists, keeping what works and leaving behind what doesn't particularly harm survival and reproduction. The appendix also highlights the speed of evolutionary change versus the persistence of biological structures. Human culture and diet have transformed dramatically in just the last 10,000 years, but our bodies are still catching up. We're essentially modern minds housed in ancient bodies, complete with parts we no longer need but can't quite shake. Next time you feel a mysterious abdominal pain, you might find yourself wondering if your appendix has finally decided to make its presence known. It's a uniquely human anxiety, worrying about an organ that exists only to potentially cause problems. Most other animals either use their appendices or have lost them entirely through evolution. Only humans seem stuck with this biological middle ground, carrying around functional remnants that serve no purpose except as evolutionary evidence. So there lies your appendix, quietly existing in your abdomen, a 3.5-inch reminder of humanity's herbivorous past and evolution's imperfect editing process. It connects you to ancestors you'll never know and might occasionally require emergency surgery for no good reason. But like all our vestigial parts, it's part of what makes us beautifully, imperfectly human. Speaking of imperfect evolutionary editing, let's move from your abdomen to your mouth, where another set of evolutionary leftovers is probably causing you problems right now, assuming you still have them. Right now, if you run your tongue along the very back of your mouth, you might feel the jagged edges of teeth that don't quite fit. Or maybe you're one of the lucky ones whose wisdom teeth were surgically removed years ago, leaving behind tender memories and a few days of eating nothing but ice cream and soup. Either way, you're intimately familiar with one of evolution's most inconvenient mistakes. Third molars that arrive in a mouth that's simply too small to accommodate them. Wisdom teeth are perhaps the most relatable vestigial organ because nearly everyone has a story about them. Unlike your quietly lurking appendix, wisdom teeth make their presence known, usually sometime between your late teens and early 20s, pushing through your gums like unwanted house guests who've arrived decades too late to a party that's already over. The name itself is misleading. These teeth have nothing to do with wisdom. They're called wisdom teeth simply because they typically emerge when you're supposedly old enough to have gained some wisdom, though anyone who's experienced the pain of impacted molars might question whether there's any wisdom in keeping them at all. The technical term, third molars, is far more accurate. They're simply the third set of grinding teeth, evolutionary leftovers from ancestors who desperately needed them. To understand why wisdom teeth cause so much trouble, you need to picture your ancient ancestors. Their jaws were significantly larger than yours, their faces longer and more robust. They needed those bigger jaws because their diet was dramatically different from anything you've ever experienced. They were chewing through tough, fibrous plants, raw meat, nuts, seeds, and roots that required serious grinding power. Their meals weren't soft, cooked, or pre-processed. Every bite was a workout for their jaw muscles. Archaeological evidence from skulls thousands of years old shows perfect alignment of all 32 teeth, including wisdom teeth that fit comfortably in spacious mouths. These ancient humans had room to spare, with wisdom teeth functioning as valuable backup grinders for a lifetime of hard chewing. When your front teeth wore down from constant use, your molars, including those wisdom teeth, became even more critical for survival. But then something remarkable happened in human evolution. Our brains grew larger, requiring bigger skulls to house them. As our craniums expanded upward and backward, our faces became proportionally smaller and flatter. The robust jaw that once housed 32 teeth comfortably began to shrink. At the same time, our diets evolved. Fire, cooking, and food processing meant we no longer needed massive grinding surfaces to break down tough plant matter. This created an evolutionary mismatch that continues to plague us today. We're still programmed to grow 32 teeth, but we now have mouths designed for 28, or maybe 30 if you're lucky. It's like trying to park a full-size truck in a compact car space. Something has to give, and usually that something is your comfort, your orthodontic alignment, or your weekend plans when those wisdom teeth decide to make their painful debut. The problems wisdom teeth cause are numerous and predictable. Most commonly, they become impacted, meaning there's simply no room for them to emerge properly. They push against your existing teeth, causing crowding, pain, and sometimes undoing years of expensive orthodontic work. They can emerge at odd angles, creating pockets where food gets trapped and bacteria flourish, leading to infections, decay, and gum disease. Some wisdom teeth only partially emerge, creating a flap of gum tissue that's impossible to clean properly. This condition, called pericoronitis, can cause swelling, pain, and infections that make it difficult to open your mouth or swallow. Others emerge seemingly fine, but are so far back in your mouth that you can't brush or floss them effectively, making them decay magnets that can eventually damage adjacent teeth. The modern solution is usually surgical removal, a procedure so common it's become a rite of passage. Oral surgeons extract millions of wisdom teeth every year, often removing all 4 at once in a single procedure. It's routine surgery, but it's still surgery, with anesthesia, recovery time, and the inherent risks that come with any medical procedure. What's particularly ironic about wisdom tooth removal is that we're essentially performing surgery to correct an evolutionary design flaw. We're using modern medical technology to fix a problem created by the fact that our evolution hasn't quite caught up with our changing needs. It's biological maintenance, removing parts that no longer serve us and actively cause problems. Not everyone needs their wisdom teeth removed. Some people have jaws large enough to accommodate them, while others never develop wisdom teeth at all. This variation suggests that human evolution is still tinkering with this particular trait. Perhaps thousands of years from now, wisdom teeth will have disappeared entirely, bred out of the human genome as unnecessary complications. Interestingly, wisdom tooth development varies significantly across different populations. Some studies suggest that certain ethnic groups are more likely to have complications with wisdom teeth, while others show higher rates of natural accommodation. This variation reflects the complex interplay between genetics, evolution, and the relatively recent changes in human diet and lifestyle. The wisdom tooth dilemma perfectly illustrates evolution's imperfect process. Natural selection doesn't design optimal solutions. It works with existing structures, gradually modifying them over countless generations. We're living through a transitional period where our anatomy hasn't fully adapted to our cultural and dietary evolution. So whether you're currently dealing with emerging wisdom teeth, recovering from their removal, or simply running your tongue over the empty spaces where they used to be, remember that you're experiencing evolution in real time. Your mouth is a battleground between your ancient genetic programming and your modern lifestyle, a reminder that we're all works in progress in the grand experiment of human evolution. Next, we'll explore another evolutionary leftover that's even more hidden than your wisdom teeth, tucked away at the base of your spine, where it occasionally reminds you of its presence in the most uncomfortable ways possible. At the very base of your spine, tucked between your hip bones and hidden beneath layers of muscle, sits a small triangular cluster of fused vertebrae that serves absolutely no purpose in your modern life. Yet this bony remnant, your coccyx or tailbone, connects you directly to ancestors who swung through trees with actual tails, millions of years before humans learned to walk upright or lie awake at night, wondering why their lower backs hurt. The tailbone is one of evolution's most obvious calling cards, a skeletal signature left behind from our distant past. Unlike your appendix, which hides quietly in your abdomen, or your wisdom teeth, which make their presence known through pain, your tailbone just sits there, doing nothing except occasionally reminding you of its existence when you fall backward onto hard pavement or spend too many hours in an uncomfortable chair. To understand why you're carrying around the remnants of a tail, you need to travel back roughly 25 million years to meet your ancestors who lived in trees and absolutely needed every vertebra in their spines. These early primates had long, muscular tails that served as fifth limbs, helping them balance as they leaped between branches, providing counterweight when they hung from trees, and acting as communication tools through various positions and movements. Your tailbone consists of 3 to 5 small vertebrae that fuse together during your development, creating a small, triangular bone about 1 inch long. In your ancestors, these same vertebrae extended outward, supporting a tail that could be longer than their entire body. Archaeological evidence shows that many of our primate relatives had tails with over 20 additional vertebrae, each one perfectly formed and fully functional. But as our evolutionary line moved from trees to ground, from climbing to walking, that tail became less useful and eventually disappeared. The transition took millions of years, with the tail gradually shortening as natural selection favored individuals who could walk more efficiently upright. The energy once devoted to growing and maintaining a long tail was redirected to developing larger brains, more sophisticated hands, and the complex hip and leg structures needed for bipedal locomotion. Here's where your tailbone gets particularly interesting from a developmental perspective. During your first 8 weeks as an embryo, you actually grew a tail. Every human embryo does. It's clearly visible in ultrasounds, a small projection extending from the developing spine, complete with vertebrae, muscles, and even blood vessels. But around the 8th week of development, that tail stops growing and begins to regress, eventually becoming absorbed into your developing body, leaving behind only the coccyx as evidence of what almost was. Occasionally, this developmental process doesn't proceed as planned, and babies are born with actual tails. These vestigial tails are rare, occurring in roughly 1 in 25,000 births, but they're perfectly formed structures with vertebrae, muscles, and skin. They can move voluntarily and even respond to emotional states, much like the tails of other mammals. Most are surgically removed shortly after birth for cosmetic and practical reasons, but their existence proves that the genetic instructions for tail development are still present in human DNA, just normally switched off during development. For most of us, the tailbone exists in a state of benign neglect until something goes wrong. Coccydynia, or tailbone pain, affects millions of people, particularly women, due to the wider shape of the female pelvis and the additional stress placed on the coccyx during childbirth. The pain can be excruciating, making sitting, standing, and even sleeping uncomfortable for months or years. The irony of coccydynia is that you're experiencing pain from a body part that serves no function. Your tailbone doesn't support your weight when you sit, doesn't help you balance when you walk, and doesn't contribute to any essential bodily function. Yet, when it's injured or inflamed, it can dominate your daily experience, making every chair feel like torture and every movement a calculated risk. Tailbone injuries typically occur from falls, childbirth, or prolonged sitting on hard surfaces. The coccyx can become bruised, fractured, or dislocated, causing pain that's often worse when sitting or transitioning from sitting to standing. Treatment options are limited because the tailbone is difficult to immobilize and slow to heal due to its limited blood supply. Some people develop chronic tailbone pain without any obvious injury, a condition that can persist for years and significantly impact quality of life. Physical therapy, specialized cushions, and pain management techniques can help, but in severe cases, surgical removal of the coccyx, called coccygyectomy, may be necessary. It's a procedure that essentially involves removing an evolutionary leftover that's causing more problems than it's worth. The tailbone also serves as an attachment point for several muscles and ligaments involved in pelvic floor function, though these same muscles could easily attach to other pelvic bones if the coccyx weren't there. Some anatomists argue that the coccyx provides minor structural support for sitting, but people who have had their tailbones surgically removed report no functional deficits, suggesting that even this minimal role is dispensable. What makes the tailbone particularly fascinating is how it represents evolution's conservative approach to change. Rather than completely eliminating structures that are no longer needed, evolution often reduces them to minimal forms. Your coccyx is evolution's compromise, keeping just enough of the original tail structure to maintain the attachment points for surrounding muscles, while eliminating the costly and unnecessary length. Next time you shift uncomfortably in your chair or feel a twinge in your lower back, remember that you're experiencing the legacy of ancestors who swung through ancient forests with magnificent tails. Your tailbone is a reminder that evolution doesn't erase the past completely. It just files it away in increasingly smaller forms, leaving you with beautiful, useless reminders of where you came from. From the hidden remnants of tails at the base of your spine, let's move to something much more visible but equally useless. The fine layer of hair covering nearly every inch of your body, a fuzzy reminder of the warm fur coat evolution decided you no longer needed. Deep in your lower leg, running along the back of your calf, lies a muscle that 10 to 15% of people are missing entirely without ever knowing it. The plantaris muscle is so unnecessary that you could live your entire life unaware of its absence. Yet for those who have it, this tiny remnant of our tree-climbing past occasionally causes problems that modern medicine struggles to explain. It's evolution's most pointless muscle, a biological leftover from ancestors who gripped branches with their feet and needed every fiber to survive. The plantaris muscle tells the story of human locomotion in miniature. This thin, ribbon-like muscle stretches from just above your knee to your heel, running parallel to your much larger and more important calf muscles. In your ancient primate ancestors, the plantaris was crucial for gripping tree branches with their feet, providing the fine motor control needed to wrap their toes around bark and maintain their grip while swinging through the canopy. But as humans evolved to walk upright on flat ground rather than climb through trees, the plantaris became increasingly irrelevant. Our feet transformed from grasping appendages into stable platforms for bipedal locomotion. Our toes shortened and lost most of their gripping ability. The complex muscular system that once allowed our ancestors to manipulate objects with their feet was gradually simplified, leaving the plantaris as a vestigial remnant with no clear modern purpose. What makes the plantaris particularly fascinating is its inconsistent presence across the human population. Unlike other vestigial organs that everyone possesses, the plantaris appears to be in active evolutionary decline. Some people have a fully formed plantaris muscle. Others have only a thin tendon with minimal muscle tissue, and still others have nothing at all where the muscle should be. This variation suggests that we're witnessing evolution in real time. The plantaris is being gradually eliminated from the human genome because it serves no function and occasionally causes problems. In evolutionary terms, any structure that costs energy to build and maintain without providing benefits is likely to disappear over thousands of generations. For most people who have a plantaris muscle, it remains completely unnoticed throughout their lives. It's too weak to contribute meaningfully to walking, running, or any other modern activities. The primary muscles of your calf, the gastrocnemius and soleus, handle all the heavy lifting when it comes to pointing your foot, pushing off the ground, and maintaining your balance. But occasionally, the plantaris makes its presence known in uncomfortable ways. Athletes, particularly runners and tennis players, sometimes experience plantaris muscle strains or ruptures. The injury is often mistaken for more serious problems like Achilles tendon damage or blood clots because the symptoms can be similar: sudden pain in the calf, swelling, and difficulty walking. A ruptured plantaris muscle creates a distinctive sensation that many people describe as feeling like someone kicked them in the back of the leg. There's usually a sudden, sharp pain followed by aching and stiffness in the calf. The irony is that this injury, while painful, has virtually no impact on function. People with ruptured plantaris muscles can usually continue their activities with minimal modification once the initial pain subsides. Medical professionals sometimes struggle to diagnose plantaris injuries precisely because the muscle is so functionally irrelevant. Unlike injuries to important muscles that cause obvious deficits in movement and strength, Plantaris problems often present as mysterious calf pain that doesn't quite fit typical injury patterns. It's like having a part break in a machine you didn't know you had. The plantaris also creates confusion during medical procedures. Surgeons performing procedures on the lower leg sometimes encounter unexpected anatomy when patients are missing their plantaris muscles entirely. What should be a predictable muscle belly turns out to be absent or replaced by a thin strand of connective tissue, requiring surgical adaptation on the spot. Interestingly, the presence or absence of the plantaris muscle appears to have some correlation with ethnicity and geographic ancestry. Some populations show higher rates of plantaris absence than others, suggesting that the evolutionary pressure to eliminate this useless muscle varies across different human groups. This geographic variation provides clues about how long different populations have been adapting to bipedal locomotion. Physical therapists and sports medicine specialists have learned to work around the plantaris muscle's quirks. When treating calf injuries, they must consider whether mysterious pain might originate from a muscle that many people don't have and that contributes nothing to normal function. It's like troubleshooting a car that might or might not have an extra part that doesn't affect performance but can occasionally malfunction. The plantaris muscle also highlights the wastefulness of maintaining vestigial structures. Even when present, it requires blood supply, nerve connections, and cellular maintenance without providing any meaningful benefit. From an engineering perspective, it's pure inefficiency, but evolution doesn't design systems from scratch. It modifies existing structures gradually, often leaving behind biological debris that takes millennia to fully eliminate. Some anatomists have tried to find modern functions for the plantaris muscle, suggesting it might provide proprioceptive feedback or contribute to subtle balance adjustments. But these theories remain speculative, and the fact that many people function perfectly without the muscle suggests that any contribution it makes is minimal at best. The plantaris represents evolution's conservative approach to eliminating unnecessary structures. Rather than immediately deleting useless body parts, evolution gradually reduces them over many generations, first making them smaller, then weaker, then optional, and finally absent. The plantaris appears to be somewhere in the middle of this process, present in some people but absent in others. Next time you feel an unexplained twinge in your calf, you might be experiencing the protest of a muscle that evolution forgot to remove, a tiny remnant of your tree-swinging ancestors that occasionally reminds you of its pointless existence. Or you might be one of the growing percentage of humans who have already evolved beyond needing this biological leftover. From muscles that some people lack entirely, let's move to muscles that everyone has but almost no one can control. Tiny remnants of our animal heritage that exist solely to wiggle parts of your body that no longer need wiggling. Right now, attached to each of your ears, are 3 tiny muscles that serve absolutely no purpose in your daily life, but connect you directly to your animal relatives who can swivel their ears like satellite dishes. These vestigial ear muscles exist in every human being, complete with nerve connections and blood supply, yet most people can't consciously control them at all. They're evolution's forgotten remote control, designed for ears that could move independently to track sounds and detect danger, now reduced to party tricks for the lucky few who can still make them work. Your ear muscles tell the story of survival through sound. The superior auricular muscle sits above your ear, the anterior auricular muscle rests in front of it, and the posterior auricular muscle lies behind it. Together, they form a triangular network of muscle fibers that once allowed your ancestors to rotate, tilt, and swivel their ears with remarkable precision, much like dogs, cats, horses, and countless other mammals do today. Watch a cat hunting, and you'll see these muscles in perfect action. Its ears can rotate nearly 180 degrees independently, tracking multiple sounds simultaneously while its head remains perfectly still. A horse can flick one ear forward to listen to its rider while keeping the other ear focused on potential threats behind it. These animals rely on their ear mobility for survival, using precise muscle control to create a three-dimensional map of their acoustic environment. But as human ancestors evolved larger brains and developed complex social communication, the need for highly mobile ears diminished. Our survival began to depend less on detecting the subtle rustle of a predator in the grass, and more on understanding the nuances of human speech and social interaction. We traded acute directional hearing for the ability to process complex language, music, and abstract sounds. The evolutionary pressure to maintain ear mobility gradually disappeared. Natural selection stopped favoring individuals with the strongest ear muscles, and over millions of years, these muscles became smaller, weaker, and largely disconnected from conscious control. Most humans retained the muscles themselves, but lost the neural pathways needed to operate them effectively. This creates the strange situation where roughly 10 to 20% of people can still wiggle their ears voluntarily, while the rest of us possess the same muscles but can't access them consciously. It's like having a car with a manual transmission, but only some people remember how to use the clutch. The mechanical parts are all there, but the knowledge of how to operate them has been largely forgotten. Ear wiggling ability appears to have some genetic component, often running in families, but it's also influenced by awareness and practice. Some people discover they can move their ears by accident, perhaps while raising their eyebrows or making exaggerated facial expressions. Others never realize they have this capability because they never try to access muscles they don't know exist. The muscles themselves are remarkably weak compared to their counterparts in other mammals. While a dog can precisely orient its ears towards specific sounds with impressive speed and accuracy, even the most skilled human ear wiggler can only achieve modest movements that provide no functional benefit. We've kept the hardware but lost the software that made it useful. Interestingly, your ear muscles still respond to emotional and autonomic stimuli, even if you can't control them consciously. During moments of intense concentration, surprise, or alertness, these muscles may contract slightly, causing barely perceptible ear movements. It's as if your body is still trying to use these muscles for their original purpose, even though your brain has largely forgotten how to communicate with them. The persistence of ear muscles in humans creates occasional medical curiosities. Rarely, people develop involuntary ear twitching or spasms that can be distracting or embarrassing. These conditions highlight the fact that the muscles are still connected to your nervous system, still receiving blood flow, and still capable of contracting, even when they serve no useful purpose. Some researchers have attempted to find modern functions for these vestigial ear muscles, suggesting they might contribute to facial expressions or help with certain types of hearing, but the evidence for any significant modern role is minimal. People who have lost function in these muscles through injury or surgery report no meaningful deficits in hearing, facial expression, or daily activities. The social aspect of ear wiggling reveals how humans have transformed a survival skill into entertainment. Those who can wiggle their ears often discover this ability in childhood and use it to amuse friends and family. It's a perfect example of how vestigial traits can find new purposes in human culture, even when they've lost their original biological function. Teaching someone to wiggle their ears is notoriously difficult because the neural pathways involved are often dormant. Unlike other muscles that we use regularly and can easily strengthen through practice, the ear muscles require reactivating connections that may have been unused since early childhood development. Some people can learn through persistent practice and biofeedback, but many never develop conscious control despite having perfectly functional muscles. The ear muscles also demonstrate how evolution maintains structures long after their primary function disappears. Rather than immediately eliminating unused body parts, evolution tends to reduce them gradually while keeping them operational at minimal levels. Your ear muscles receive just enough neural input and blood supply to remain viable, even though they contribute nothing to your daily survival. From an evolutionary perspective, maintaining vestigial ear muscles costs very little energy, but preserves the potential for future adaptation. If environmental pressures ever again favored enhanced directional hearing, the basic muscular framework would still be available for natural selection to work with, though such a scenario seems highly unlikely given the trajectory of human technological development. Next time you see someone wiggle their ears at a party, remember that you're witnessing a direct connection to humanity's animal heritage, a rare glimpse of muscles that once helped your ancestors survive in a world where the ability to track sounds could mean the difference between life and death. From muscles that most people can't control to tendons that many people don't have, let's explore another optional body part that reveals the ongoing process of human evolution in your own forearms. Place your hand flat on a table and bend your wrist downward while keeping your fingers straight. Now touch your thumb to your pinky finger. Look at your wrist, and you might see a prominent tendon standing out like a guitar string beneath your skin. Or you might see nothing at all. That tendon, if you have it, is called the palmaris longus, and it's connected to a muscle that was designed for claws you'll never grow, serving a function you'll never need, yet somehow still present in roughly 85% of the human population. The palmaris longus represents one of evolution's most obvious editing mistakes. This long, thin muscle runs from your elbow to your palm, creating a tendon that's clearly visible in most people when they flex their wrist in a specific way. But unlike the other muscles and tendons in your forearm that help you grip objects, type on keyboards, or perform delicate manual tasks, the palmaris longus contributes essentially nothing to modern hand function. To understand why you might be carrying around this useless muscle, you need to imagine your ancestors before they developed the sophisticated hands that allowed them to make tools, create art, and eventually type messages on smartphones. These early primates had hands tipped with sharp claws rather than flat nails, and the palmaris longus was crucial for extending and retracting those claws during climbing, hunting, and self-defense. The muscle worked in coordination with other forearm muscles to provide precise claw control. When your ancestors needed to dig their claws into tree bark for climbing or extend them for defense, the palmaris longus helped coordinate these movements. It was part of an integrated system designed for hands that functioned more like the paws of modern cats or the claws of birds of prey. But as human hands evolved toward their current form, developing opposable thumbs and losing their claws in favor of flat nails, the palmaris longus became increasingly irrelevant. The muscle that once controlled claw extension now had nothing to extend. The sophisticated grip strength and fine motor control that define modern human hands made the palmaris longus redundant. This evolutionary transition created the current situation where some people have a fully functional palmaris longus muscle, while others are missing it entirely. The variation is so common that anatomists consider both conditions completely normal. You can be born without this muscle, lose it through injury, or have it surgically removed without experiencing any functional deficit whatsoever. The simple test for detecting your palmaris longus reveals just how unnecessary it is. When you flex your wrist and touch your thumb to your pinky, you're performing one of the few movements that actually engages this muscle. Most people go through their entire lives without ever using the palmaris longus in any meaningful way, despite carrying around a muscle that requires blood supply, nerve connections, and cellular maintenance. Medical professionals have found a modern use for the palmaris longus that its original designers never intended. Because this tendon is long, strong, and functionally unnecessary, surgeons often harvest it for reconstructive procedures. The palmaris longus tendon can be used to repair damaged ligaments in the wrist, reconstruct torn tendons elsewhere in the body, or even help repair facial paralysis by providing material for nerve grafts. This medical application represents a perfect example of evolutionary recycling. A body part that evolution kept around despite its uselessness has found new purpose in modern medicine. Surgeons can remove the entire palmaris longus tendon, leaving patients with no functional loss but providing valuable biological material for repairing more important structures. The absence of the palmaris longus in 15 to 20% of people provides fascinating insight into ongoing human evolution. Unlike vestigial organs that everyone possesses but nobody uses, the palmaris longus appears to be actively disappearing from the human genome. Some populations show higher rates of absence than others, suggesting that different groups are at different stages of eliminating this unnecessary muscle. Interestingly, the palmaris longus can be absent in one arm but present in the other, creating an asymmetry that has no functional consequences. This unilateral absence demonstrates how evolution tinkers with body structures independently, sometimes eliminating unnecessary parts on one side while maintaining them on the other. Physical therapists and sports medicine specialists sometimes encounter confusion when treating wrist injuries in patients who lack the palmaris longus. The missing tendon can make anatomical landmarks look different and complicate certain diagnostic procedures. It's like following a map where some of the expected roads simply don't exist. The palmaris longus also creates interesting challenges for anatomical education. Medical students learn to identify this tendon as a standard part of forearm anatomy, but then discover that many of their classmates and patients are missing it entirely. It's a practical lesson in human variation and the ongoing nature of evolutionary change. Some researchers have attempted to identify subtle functions that the palmaris longus might still serve, such as contributing to grip strength or wrist stability. But careful studies consistently show that people without this muscle perform just as well on tests of hand function, grip strength, and fine motor control as those who have it. Any contribution it makes is so minimal as to be undetectable. The palmaris longus perfectly illustrates how evolution maintains structures long after they've lost their primary purpose. Rather than immediately eliminating unused body parts, evolution keeps them around at minimal cost until they either find new functions or gradually disappear through random genetic drift. Your palmaris longus, if you have one, is caught in this evolutionary transition zone. Next time you perform the simple test to check for your palmaris longus, remember that you're examining direct evidence of human evolution in action. Whether that tendon pops up beneath your skin or remains hidden, you're witnessing the gradual process by which our species sheds the biological equipment it no longer needs, while occasionally finding creative new uses for evolutionary leftovers. From tendons designed for claws we'll never have, let's move to something even more obviously unnecessary: functional body parts that exist in the wrong bodies, evolutionary accidents that reveal just how imprecise the development process can be. Every male human being carries around two fully formed nipples that will never serve their intended biological function. These aren't tiny vestigial bumps or evolutionary remnants barely visible to the naked eye. They're complete mammary structures with ducts, nerves, blood supply, and all the cellular machinery needed for milk production, sitting uselessly on the chest of roughly half the human population for no better reason than the fact that evolution builds all humans using the same basic blueprint before, deciding which parts to activate. Male nipples represent evolution's most obvious oversight, a perfect example of how natural selection works with existing structures rather than designing organisms from scratch. Every human embryo, regardless of its eventual sex, begins development following the same pattern. During the first 6 weeks of embryonic development, before sex hormones kick in to differentiate male and female bodies, all embryos develop identical mammary ridges that will eventually become nipples and breast tissue. By the time testosterone and other male hormones begin influencing development around the 7th week, the nipples have already formed. The hormones can prevent breast tissue from developing further and guide the embryo toward other male characteristics, but they can't undo the nipples that have already been established. It's like starting to build a house using a standard blueprint, then deciding halfway through construction that you want a different design. The foundation is already there, so you work with it. This shared developmental pathway explains why male and female nipples are essentially identical in structure during early life. They have the same nerve endings, the same blood supply, and the same basic anatomy. The only difference is that female nipples will eventually be activated by estrogen and other hormones during puberty to develop into functional mammary glands, while male nipples remain in their embryonic state indefinitely. The existence of male nipples proves that evolution doesn't follow intelligent design principles. If humans were engineered from scratch, males would simply not have nipples at all, since they serve no reproductive purpose and require biological resources to build and maintain. But evolution works by modifying existing templates, not by starting fresh with each new adaptation. What makes male nipples particularly fascinating is that they're not completely non-functional. Under certain hormonal conditions, male nipples can actually lactate. This happens rarely, usually due to hormonal imbalances, certain medications, or medical conditions that increase prolactin levels. But the basic mammary tissue is present in all males, dormant but potentially activatable under the right circumstances. Cases of male lactation have been documented throughout history, often occurring during times of severe stress, malnutrition, or hormonal disruption. Some medications, particularly those affecting the endocrine system, can trigger lactation in men by altering the balance of hormones that normally keep mammary tissue inactive. It's proof that the biological machinery is present and functional, just switched off under normal circumstances. Even more rarely, men can develop gynecomastia, the enlargement of breast tissue, often during puberty when hormone levels are fluctuating dramatically. This condition demonstrates that male mammary tissue retains its sensitivity to hormonal signals throughout life, even though it's never intended to be used. The tissue remains ready to respond, like a dormant program waiting for the right activation code. The universality of male nipples across all mammals suggests that this shared developmental pattern is deeply embedded in mammalian biology. Male dogs, cats, horses, and virtually all other male mammals have nipples they'll never use. It's not a human quirk, but a fundamental feature of how mammalian development works, prioritizing efficiency of the developmental program over the precision of the final product. From a philosophical perspective, male nipples raise interesting questions about the nature of evolutionary design. They're evidence that evolution is not goal-directed or anticipatory. Natural selection can only work with variations that already exist, modifying and adapting structures that are already present rather than creating entirely new ones for specific purposes. The medical significance of male nipples is usually minimal, but they can occasionally cause problems. Male breast cancer, while rare, does occur and typically develops in the same nipple and breast tissue that exists in all males. Men can also experience nipple sensitivity, injury, or irritation, just like women, despite having no functional need for nipple protection. Culturally, male nipples occupy a strange space in social norms. They're universally present but rarely discussed, functional but never used, visible but somehow invisible in social contexts where female nipples are considered inappropriate. This cultural asymmetry highlights how social conventions often ignore biological realities. The persistence of male nipples also illustrates evolution's conservative approach to eliminating unnecessary structures. Because nipples don't significantly harm male survival or reproduction, there's no strong selective pressure to eliminate them. They represent a biological free lunch, costing little to maintain while preserving the developmental flexibility that allows the same basic body plan to produce both sexes. Some evolutionary biologists have speculated about potential benefits of retaining male nipples, such as preserving genetic pathways that might be useful if environmental pressures ever favored male parental care involving lactation. But these theories remain highly speculative, and the most likely explanation is simply that male nipples persist because there's no compelling reason for evolution to eliminate them. The study of male nipples has also contributed to our understanding of sex determination and hormonal development. They serve as useful markers for studying how sex hormones influence development and how the same genetic instructions can produce different outcomes depending on the hormonal environment during embryonic growth. So every time you notice male nipples, whether your own or someone else's, remember that you're looking at evolution's commitment to efficiency over elegance. Rather than creating separate developmental programs for males and females, evolution uses one template and modifies it with hormones, leaving behind perfectly functional structures in bodies that will never need them. From the most obvious vestigial structures on the outside of your body, let's move to one of the most hidden ones inside your eyes, a tiny fold of tissue that once protected your ancestors' vision but now just sits quietly in the corner, doing absolutely nothing. In the inner corner of each of your eyes, tucked away like a forgotten bookmark, lies a small pink fold of tissue that most people never notice unless they're applying makeup or have something irritating their eye. This tiny structure, called the plica semilunaris, is all that remains of the third eyelid that once protected your ancestors' eyes from dust, debris, and bright sunlight. It's evolution's abandoned safety feature, a biological windshield wiper that was downgraded to decorative status millions of years ago. The plica semilunaris is your vestigial third eyelid, a remnant of the nictitating membrane that many animals still use today. If you've ever watched a bird blink, you might have noticed a translucent membrane that sweeps across its eye from the inner corner, cleaning the surface and providing protection while maintaining vision. That's a fully functional third eyelid, something your ancient ancestors possessed but you've inherited only as a small, useless fold. This third eyelid system was once crucial for survival. Unlike your upper and lower eyelids, which close completely and temporarily block vision. The nictitating membrane could sweep across the eye while remaining transparent. It allowed animals to clean their eyes, protect them from flying debris, and shield them from bright light without going temporarily blind in the process. Many modern animals still rely heavily on their third eyelids. Sharks use them to protect their eyes when attacking prey. Birds of prey deploy them during high-speed dives to prevent eye damage from wind and debris. Cats and dogs have third eyelids that become visible when they're sick, stressed, or sedated, sliding across the eye like a built-in protective shield. But as human ancestors developed more sophisticated behaviors and environments, the need for constant eye protection diminished. The development of tool use, shelter construction, and eventually indoor living reduced exposure to the flying debris and harsh environmental conditions that made third eyelids essential. The complex muscular system needed to operate a functional third eyelid became an unnecessary luxury. Evolution gradually reduced the third eyelid from a functional membrane to the small fold of tissue you can see today. The plica semilunaris retains some of the cellular structure of a true nictitating membrane, including mucus-producing cells and a small amount of cartilage, but it lacks the muscles and nerve connections needed for movement. It's like having a car door handle that's permanently stuck in the closed position. Your plica semilunaris sits quietly in the inner corner of your eye, doing essentially nothing except occasionally collecting debris or becoming irritated. Unlike functional third eyelids that actively clean the eye surface, your vestigial version just accumulates the dust and particles it was once designed to sweep away. It's turned from a solution into part of the problem. Sometimes the plica semilunaris becomes inflamed or swollen, creating a condition that can be uncomfortable and cosmetically concerning. The tissue can enlarge due to allergies, infections, or irritation, creating a visible pink bump in the corner of the eye that can interfere with vision or cause constant awareness of something being wrong with your eye. Medical professionals occasionally encounter patients who are concerned about their plica semilunaris, not realizing it's a normal anatomical structure. The pink tissue can be alarming to people who suddenly notice it, especially if it becomes enlarged or irritated. It's one of those body parts that becomes concerning precisely because most people don't know it exists until something goes wrong. The variation in plica semilunaris size and prominence among different people provides another example of ongoing evolutionary change. Some individuals have relatively large, noticeable folds, while others have barely visible remnants. This variation suggests that the human population is still in the process of reducing this structure, with some people further along in the evolutionary elimination process than others. Interestingly, the plica semilunaris sometimes contains small bits of cartilage, a reminder of the more complex structure it once was. This cartilage serves no function in humans, but represents the skeletal framework that once supported a movable third eyelid. It's like finding the foundation of a building that was torn down but never completely removed. The study of vestigial third eyelids has contributed to our understanding of evolutionary relationships between species. The presence and structure of nictitating membranes provide clues about common ancestry and evolutionary divergence. Your tiny plica semilunaris connects you not just to your human ancestors, but to the broader family tree of vertebrate life. Some researchers have speculated about potential modern functions for the plica semilunaris, such as contributing to tear drainage or providing additional mucus production for eye lubrication. But any function it serves is minimal compared to the robust protective capabilities of a true third eyelid. It's like using a smartphone as a paperweight, technically functional but dramatically underutilizing the original design. The plica semilunaris also highlights how evolution maintains structures long after their primary function disappears. Rather than immediately eliminating unused body parts, evolution tends to reduce them gradually while keeping minimal versions around. Your vestigial third eyelid receives just enough blood supply and nerve connections to remain viable, even though it contributes nothing meaningful to your vision or eye health. Next time you look closely in a mirror or feel something unusual in the corner of your eye, remember that you're encountering a direct link to ancestors who lived in a world where protecting your eyes from flying debris could mean the difference between successful hunting and starvation. Your plica semilunaris may no longer sweep across your eyes like a biological windshield wiper, but it remains as a small testament to the environments your ancestors navigated and the evolutionary solutions they no longer needed. From the vestigial protective equipment in your eyes, let's move to another small bump that some people carry, this one on the outside of their ears, providing visible proof of evolution's tinkering with the shape and structure of human anatomy. Run your finger along the outer rim of your ear, tracing the curved edge from top to bottom. About halfway down, you might feel a small bump or point jutting out from the otherwise smooth cartilage. This tiny projection, present in roughly 10 to 15% of people, is called Darwin's tubercle. Named after Charles Darwin, who first described it as evidence of human evolution. It's a direct remnant of the pointed ears your mammalian ancestors needed for survival, now reduced to a small bump that serves no function except to remind you that your family tree includes creatures with dramatically different ear shapes. Darwin's tubercle represents one of evolution's most visible calling cards, a structural leftover that's obvious enough for anyone to detect, yet useless enough to ignore completely. Unlike other vestigial features that require medical knowledge to identify, this one can be spotted simply by running your finger along your ear or looking carefully in a mirror. It's evolution's signature, carved into the cartilage of your outer ear. The tubercle is essentially a vestigial ear point, a remnant of the sharp, pointed ears that most mammals still possess today. Look at a cat, dog, horse, or bat, and you'll see ears that come to distinct points designed to funnel sound waves efficiently toward the ear canal. These pointed ears aren't just cosmetic features. They're sophisticated acoustic devices that help animals pinpoint the location of sounds with remarkable precision. Your ancient mammalian ancestors had similar pointed ears, complete with the cartilaginous framework needed to maintain their shape and the muscles required to move them independently. These ears could swivel like radar dishes, tracking sounds from multiple directions simultaneously, while the animal remained focused on other activities like feeding or scanning for predators. But as human ancestors evolved, their survival strategies shifted away from acute directional hearing toward other sensory and cognitive abilities. The development of complex social communication, tool use, and cooperative hunting reduced the critical importance of being able to precisely locate every sound in the environment. Gradually, the pointed ear structure became less essential for survival. Evolution responded by slowly rounding off human ears, making them less pointed and more curved. This change improved the efficiency of other functions, such as protecting the ear canal from debris and weather, while sacrificing some of the acute directional hearing capabilities that pointed ears provided. The process wasn't instantaneous or complete, leaving behind Darwin's tubercle as evidence of the original pointed design. What makes Darwin's tubercle particularly interesting is its variable expression within the human population. Some people have prominent tubercles that are easily visible and palpable, others have subtle bumps that are barely detectable, and many people have no tubercle at all. This variation suggests that humans are still in the evolutionary process of eliminating this vestigial structure. The tubercle often runs in families, indicating a genetic component to its presence or absence. Parents with Darwin's tubercles are more likely to have children who also possess them, though the inheritance pattern isn't simple or predictable. It's as if evolution is still deciding whether to keep this feature or eliminate it entirely from the human genome. Individual variation in Darwin's tubercle expression also demonstrates how evolution affects different people at different rates. Some families seem to be further along in the process of losing pointed ear remnants, while others retain more obvious evidence of their mammalian heritage. It's a real-time example of evolutionary change happening across human populations. The tubercle can appear on one ear but not the other, creating an asymmetry that has no functional consequences but provides fascinating insight into developmental biology. This unilateral presence suggests that the genetic instructions for tubercle formation can be independently regulated on each side of the body, allowing evolution to experiment with eliminating the structure gradually. Medical professionals occasionally encounter patients concerned about lumps or bumps on their ears, not realizing that Darwin's tubercles are completely normal anatomical variations. The tubercles are composed of cartilage and skin, with no special nerve endings, blood vessels, or other structures that would make them medically significant. They're essentially harmless evolutionary souvenirs. Some people with prominent Darwin's tubercles report that they can be slightly sensitive to pressure or cold, probably because the raised cartilage is more exposed than the surrounding ear structure. But this sensitivity is usually minimal and doesn't interfere with daily activities or ear function. The study of Darwin's tubercles has contributed to our understanding of human evolutionary relationships and population genetics. Different ethnic groups show varying rates of tubercle presence, providing clues about evolutionary history and migration patterns. These variations help scientists trace how different human populations have adapted to their environments over thousands of generations. Interestingly, Darwin's tubercles sometimes become more noticeable with age, as the surrounding ear cartilage changes shape or as weight loss makes facial features more prominent. What was once a barely detectable bump might become more obvious, suddenly drawing attention to an evolutionary feature that was always present but previously hidden. The tubercle also highlights evolution's conservative approach to eliminating unnecessary structures. Rather than immediately removing all traces of pointed ears, evolution has gradually reduced them while maintaining the basic cartilage framework. Darwin's tubercle represents an intermediate stage in this ongoing process of anatomical simplification. Next time you're lying in bed unable to sleep, tracing the edge of your ear while your mind wanders, remember that you might be touching direct evidence of your evolutionary history. Whether you find a small bump or a smooth curve, you're exploring the ongoing story of how human anatomy continues to adapt and change, leaving behind tiny monuments to the creatures we once were. From the visible evidence of evolution on your ears, let's move to something happening beneath your skin. Tiny muscles attached to every hair on your body that are still trying to perform a function that stopped being useful millions of years ago. Right now, attached to every single hair follicle on your body, is a tiny muscle called the erector pili. These microscopic muscles are contracting and relaxing constantly, attempting to perform a function that worked perfectly for your furry ancestors, but accomplishes absolutely nothing for you except creating the bumpy texture you call goosebumps. You have millions of these minuscule muscles working tirelessly to fluff up hair that's too short and sparse to provide any meaningful insulation or protection. The erector pili muscles represent one of evolution's most persistent mistakes, a reflex system that continues operating long after its original purpose disappeared. Every time you get cold, scared, excited, or emotionally moved, these tiny muscles contract in unison, pulling your body hairs upright in a coordinated display that once served crucial survival functions but now serves only as a curiosity. In your ancestors, this hair-raising mechanism was essential for survival. When early humans and their primate relatives got cold, the erector pili muscles would contract simultaneously, causing their thick fur to stand upright and create insulating air pockets. This process, called piloerection, worked like an automatic down jacket, trapping warm air close to the skin and dramatically improving the body's ability to retain heat during cold weather. The system also served as a threat display mechanism. When your ancestors encountered predators or rivals, the same muscles would make their hair stand on end, creating the appearance of a larger, more intimidating creature. You can see this response in modern animals like cats, who arch their backs and fluff their fur to appear twice their normal size when threatened, or porcupines, whose raised quills create an unmistakable warning to potential attackers. But as human ancestors lost most of their body hair through evolutionary adaptation to hot climates and increased physical activity, the erector pili muscles became increasingly pointless. The fine short hairs that replaced thick fur simply couldn't trap air effectively when raised upright. The intimidation factor disappeared when the hair became too sparse to create a meaningful size increase. Yet your body continues to activate these muscles as if you still had functional fur. When you watch a particularly moving piece of music or experience a moment of intense emotion, millions of tiny muscles contract to raise hairs that can barely be seen, creating the characteristic bumpy texture of goosebumps across your skin. It's your body's attempt to perform an ancient response with inadequate modern equipment. The triggers for goosebumps reveal how deeply embedded this reflex is in your nervous system. Cold temperatures activate the response as your body attempts to improve insulation. Fear and excitement trigger it as part of the ancient threat response. Music, art, and emotional moments can cause goosebumps through pathways that connect aesthetic appreciation to primitive survival responses. Some people are more prone to goosebumps than others, a variation that may reflect differences in sensitivity of the sympathetic nervous system or the responsiveness of individual erector pili muscles. These differences suggest that the goosebump response is still evolving, with some people maintaining stronger connections to this ancient reflex, while others show reduced sensitivity. The medical term for goosebumps, cutis anserina, literally means goose skin, referring to the bumpy texture that resembles the skin of a plucked bird. This comparison highlights just how universal the hair-raising response is among animals with fur or feathers. Birds use the same basic mechanism to fluff their feathers for insulation and display, demonstrating that your goosebump reflex connects you to a broad range of vertebrate relatives. Occasionally, the erector pili muscles can cause medical problems despite their general harmlessness. Some people develop a condition called keratosis pilaris, where the hair follicles become clogged and the muscles create permanent small bumps on the skin. This condition is essentially the erector pili muscles working too well, creating visible evidence of their activity even when they shouldn't be contracting. The emotional aspect of goosebumps provides fascinating insight into how ancient survival mechanisms can be repurposed for modern experiences. The same neural pathways that once prepared your ancestors for physical threats now respond to beautiful music, inspiring speeches, or moments of profound connection. Your body treats aesthetic appreciation as if it were a survival situation requiring the fluffing of non-existent fur. Research into goosebumps has revealed connections between this physical response and personality traits, musical sensitivity, and even empathy levels. People who experience frequent goosebumps from music and art often score higher on measures of openness to experience and emotional sensitivity, suggesting that the ancient hair-raising response has found new relevance in modern emotional and aesthetic experiences. The persistence of erector pili muscles also demonstrates evolution's tendency to maintain functional systems even when their output becomes meaningless. These muscles require nerve connections, blood supply, and cellular maintenance despite producing no useful result. They represent millions of years of evolutionary investment that continues operating purely out of biological momentum. Next time you feel goosebumps rising on your arms during a particularly beautiful song or when a cold breeze hits your skin, remember that you're experiencing an ancient survival reflex in action. Millions of tiny muscles are contracting in perfect coordination, attempting to fluff fur you don't have and create insulation that can't work, all because your nervous system is still programmed for a body you evolved away from millions of years ago. From muscles that raise useless hairs all over your body, let's move to an even more hidden vestigial structure tucked away in your nasal passages, a chemical sensing organ that once helped your ancestors navigate their world through smell, but now exists as a barely functional reminder of sensory abilities you've largely forgotten. Hidden deep within your nasal passages, tucked away in a small pit lined with specialized cells, lies a mysterious organ that most people don't know they possess. The vomeronasal organ, also called Jacobson's organ, is your vestigial sixth sense, a chemical detection system that once helped your ancestors navigate their world through pheromones and chemical signals, but now exists as a barely functional remnant of sensory abilities that have largely faded from human experience. The vomeronasal organ represents one of evolution's most intriguing question marks in human anatomy. Unlike other vestigial structures that are clearly non-functional, this tiny organ occupies a gray area between complete uselessness and subtle activity. Scientists continue to debate whether humans retain any meaningful ability to detect pheromones or whether the vomeronasal organ has become completely inactive, leaving behind only the structural framework of a once powerful sense. In most mammals, the vomeronasal organ is a sophisticated chemical analysis laboratory. Snakes flick their tongues to collect chemical information from the air, then press their tongues against their vomeronasal organs to analyze the molecular composition of their environment. They can detect prey, predators, mates, and territorial boundaries through this chemical sense, creating a detailed map of their surroundings that's completely invisible to humans. Cats demonstrate vomeronasal organ function through a behavior called flamen response, where they curl back their lips and hold their mouths slightly open while inhaling. This distinctive expression allows them to draw chemical signals directly to their vomeronasal organs, where specialized neurons analyze pheromones and other chemical messages. The information they gather influences mating behavior, territorial responses, and social interactions. Your ancestors once possessed similar chemical sensing abilities. Early mammals relied heavily on pheromone communication for finding mates, establishing territories, and identifying family members. The vomeronasal organ was a crucial component of social structure, providing information that supplemented and sometimes superseded visual and auditory signals. But as human ancestors developed more complex visual systems, sophisticated language, and intricate social behaviors, the importance of chemical communication gradually diminished. Natural selection began favoring individuals with enhanced cognitive abilities over those with acute chemical sensing capabilities. The neural pathways supporting vomeronasal organ function were gradually reassigned to other purposes or allowed to atrophy. Modern humans retain the structural remnants of the vomeronasal organ, located in the nasal septum about 2 centimeters inside each nostril. The organ consists of a small pit lined with sensory cells that still maintain some of the cellular machinery needed for chemical detection. However, the neural connections between these cells and the brain appear to be severely reduced or entirely absent in most people. The debate over human pheromone sensitivity continues to generate research and controversy. Some studies suggest that humans can unconsciously respond to certain chemical signals, influencing mate selection, menstrual cycle synchronization, and emotional states. Other research finds no convincing evidence for meaningful pheromone effects in human behavior, suggesting that our vomeronasal organs are truly vestigial. What makes this particularly interesting is the variation in vomeronasal organ structure among different people. Some individuals have clearly defined organ structures with intact sensory cells, while others show severely reduced or seemingly absent organs. This variation suggests that humans may be in the process of completely losing this sensory system, with some people further along in the elimination process than others. The medical significance of the human vomeronasal organ is minimal, but it occasionally causes confusion during nasal examinations. The small pits where the organs are located can collect debris or become irritated, leading to symptoms that patients and sometimes physicians find difficult to explain. It's another example of vestigial structures causing problems despite serving no useful function. Research into human chemical communication has revealed some intriguing possibilities. Studies have found that people can sometimes detect emotional states through chemical cues, that mothers can identify their newborn infants by scent alone, and that some individuals show physiological responses to chemical signals they cannot consciously detect. Whether these abilities involve the vomeronasal organ or other chemical sensing pathways remains unclear. The loss of conscious chemical sensing ability may have contributed to humans' development of alternative communication methods. As we became less able to detect chemical signals automatically, we developed more sophisticated verbal and visual communication systems to convey information that other mammals transmit through pheromones. Some researchers have speculated that the decline in human vomeronasal organ function might explain certain aspects of modern social behavior. The reduced ability to unconsciously assess chemical compatibility could contribute to relationship difficulties, social misunderstandings, or the need for conscious evaluation of qualities that other mammals assess automatically through pheromone detection. The vomeronasal organ also highlights how sensory evolution involves trade-offs. As humans developed enhanced visual processing, complex language abilities, and sophisticated reasoning skills, we may have lost some of the automatic chemical sensing capabilities that still guide the behavior of most other mammals. We gained cognitive flexibility, but lost some instinctive social guidance systems. Next time you're lying awake at night, perhaps unconsciously taking in the subtle scents around you, remember that your ancestors once possessed a powerful chemical sensing system that could analyze those molecules with remarkable precision. Your vestigial vomeronasal organ may still be attempting to process chemical information, but the neural pathways to interpret that data have largely disappeared, leaving you with only the faintest echoes of a sixth sense that once shaped every aspect of social life. From the hidden chemical sensors in your nose, let's move to something more structurally obvious but equally optional: The extra ribs that some people carry around, bonus bones that demonstrate just how variable human anatomy can be. Most people assume they know exactly how many ribs they have, but roughly 1 in 200 people are walking around with bonus bones they might never discover. While the standard human blueprint calls for 12 pairs of ribs, some people develop 13 pairs or even 14, carrying extra ribs that serve no function and often cause no symptoms. These supernumerary ribs represent evolution's ongoing experimentation with human skeletal structure, demonstrating that even something as basic as your rib cage remains surprisingly variable. Extra ribs come in several varieties, each with different implications for your daily life. Cervical ribs develop above your normal rib cage, emerging from the 7th cervical vertebra in your neck. These ribs can be fully formed bones or simply fibrous bands that connect to your regular ribs. Lumbar ribs appear below your standard rib cage, growing from the first lumbar vertebra in your lower back. Both types represent developmental variations that occur during embryonic formation. The development of extra ribs reflects the evolutionary plasticity of mammalian skeletal systems. Different mammals have dramatically different rib counts, from as few as 9 pairs in some whales to as many as 24 pairs in certain sloths. Humans typically settle on 12 pairs, but the genetic instructions for rib formation sometimes extend the pattern beyond the normal boundaries, creating additional ribs that weren't part of the original architectural plan. Most extra ribs go unnoticed throughout a person's entire life. They're often discovered incidentally during chest X-rays for unrelated medical issues, surprising both patients and physicians who assumed they were dealing with standard anatomy. These bonus ribs usually don't affect breathing, posture, or daily activities, existing as harmless anatomical curiosities that demonstrate the remarkable variation possible in human skeletal structure. However, cervical ribs can occasionally cause problems by compressing nearby nerves and blood vessels. The extra rib can create pressure on the brachial plexus, the network of nerves that supplies your arm, or compress the subclavian artery that carries blood to your upper extremity. This compression can cause tingling, numbness, weakness, or pain in the arm and hand, particularly during certain movements or positions. The condition caused by cervical rib compression is called thoracic outlet syndrome, and it affects roughly 10% of people born with cervical ribs. The symptoms can be subtle and intermittent, making diagnosis challenging. People might experience arm fatigue during overhead activities, numbness in their fingers while sleeping, or aching pain that seems to have no clear cause. Lumbar ribs, located in your lower back, are generally less problematic than cervical ribs because they're surrounded by larger muscles and don't compress vital nerves or blood vessels. Most people with lumbar ribs never know they have them unless they undergo imaging studies for back pain or other issues. These extra ribs might occasionally contribute to lower back discomfort, but they rarely cause serious problems. The genetics of extra rib formation remain incompletely understood, but the trait appears to have some hereditary component. Families with higher rates of extra ribs suggest genetic influences on skeletal development patterns. However, the inheritance isn't straightforward, and many people with extra ribs have no family history of similar variations. Extra ribs also demonstrate how developmental biology can produce anatomical variations that fall outside typical medical textbook descriptions. Medical students learn standard anatomy, but practicing physicians regularly encounter patients whose bodies deviate from textbook norms. Extra ribs represent one of many normal variants that highlight the remarkable diversity possible within human anatomy. The surgical management of problematic cervical ribs involves removing the extra bone and any associated fibrous tissue that might be compressing nerves or blood vessels. The procedure is relatively straightforward, but it requires careful attention to preserving important structures while eliminating the source of compression. Most people recover fully after cervical rib removal with complete resolution of their symptoms. Interestingly, extra ribs sometimes become more symptomatic with age or changes in activity level. A cervical rib that caused no problems during childhood might begin compressing nerves during adulthood as posture changes, muscles develop differently, or repetitive activities create inflammation in the area. This delayed onset of symptoms can make the connection between extra ribs and clinical problems difficult to recognize. The presence of extra ribs also affects medical imaging interpretation. Radiologists must be aware of anatomical variants when reading X-rays, CT scans, and MRI studies, distinguishing between normal variations and pathological conditions. An extra rib might initially be mistaken for a tumor or other abnormal growth until careful analysis reveals its true nature. Athletes sometimes discover their extra ribs when training intensifies or when they develop symptoms related to repetitive overhead motions. Swimming, tennis, and weightlifting can exacerbate thoracic outlet syndrome in people with cervical ribs, leading to performance limitations that seem disproportionate to their training intensity. The study of rib number variations has contributed to our understanding of evolutionary development and the genetic control of skeletal patterning. The genes that determine where ribs develop and how many form provide insights into fundamental questions about body, organization, and the evolutionary flexibility of the rumus. Anatomical structures. So whether you're lying in bed feeling the familiar curve of your rib cage, or discovering during a medical exam that you've been carrying around bonus bones your entire life, remember that even something as basic as your skeletal framework remains surprisingly variable. Your ribs, whether you have the standard 12 pairs or a few extras, represent evolution's ongoing experimentation with human anatomy. From the variable number of ribs protecting your vital organs, let's move to our final vestigial muscle, a small triangular structure in your abdomen that 20% of people are missing entirely, yet somehow manage to function perfectly without. Deep in your lower abdomen, just above your pubic bone, lies a small triangular muscle that roughly 20% of people are missing entirely without ever knowing it. The pyramidalis muscle is evolution's most optional accessory, a tiny strip of tissue that serves no clear purpose in modern humans, yet persists in most people as a biological afterthought. If you have it, congratulations on carrying around a muscle that does nothing. If you don't have it, congratulations on being slightly more evolutionarily streamlined than your neighbors. The pyramidalis muscle sits at the very bottom of your abdominal wall, running from your pubic bone upward toward your navel in a narrow triangular shape. It's positioned directly beneath your rectus abdominis, the prominent six-pack muscles that actually provide core strength and stability. Unlike these important abdominal muscles that help you sit up, bend forward, and stabilize your spine, the pyramidalis appears to contribute nothing meaningful to human movement or posture. What makes the pyramidalis particularly intriguing is its variable presence across the human population. Some people have well-developed pyramidalis muscles on both sides, others have the muscle on only one side, and still others have no pyramidalis muscles at all. This variation occurs randomly, with no apparent correlation to fitness level, abdominal strength, or functional ability. The inconsistent presence of the pyramidalis muscle provides a perfect example of ongoing human evolution. Unlike vestigial organs that everyone possesses, the pyramidalis appears to be actively disappearing from the human genome. The muscle serves no essential function, costs biological resources to build and maintain, and occasionally causes confusion during medical procedures, making it a prime candidate for evolutionary elimination. Medical professionals who perform abdominal surgeries regularly encounter this anatomical variation. Surgeons operating on the lower abdomen must be prepared to find normal anatomy, a prominent pyramidalis muscle, or complete absence of the structure. The variation can affect surgical planning and technique, requiring adaptation based on what the surgeon actually finds, rather than what anatomy textbooks describe as standard. The pyramidalis muscle's unclear function has led to various theories about its original purpose. Some anatomists suggest it once helped with urination or defecation by providing additional pressure on the bladder or rectum. Others propose it may have assisted with abdominal compression during childbirth or physical exertion, but none of these theories have strong supporting evidence, and people without the muscle show no deficits in any of these functions. The muscle's position at the bottom of the abdominal wall suggests it might be a remnant from ancestors with different body proportions or reproductive anatomy. As human pelvic structure evolved to accommodate bipedal locomotion and larger brain sizes required changes in birth canal dimensions, many muscles in the pelvic region underwent modifications or became obsolete. Physical therapists and fitness professionals sometimes encounter confusion about the pyramidalis muscle when clients ask about lower abdominal training. Some people can feel a small muscle contracting in their lower abdomen during certain exercises, while others feel nothing in the same area. This difference often reflects the presence or absence of pyramidalis muscles rather than variations in fitness level or exercise technique. The pyramidalis muscle also creates interesting challenges for anatomical education. Medical students learn about this muscle as part of standard abdominal anatomy, but then discover during dissection or surgery that many cadavers and patients don't actually possess it. This variation provides practical lessons about human anatomical diversity and the limitations of standardized anatomical descriptions. Research into the pyramidalis muscle has revealed fascinating patterns in its presence across different populations. Some ethnic groups show higher rates of pyramidalis absence than others, suggesting that the evolutionary elimination of this muscle is proceeding at different rates in different human populations. These variations provide clues about migration patterns, genetic drift, and the ongoing nature of human evolution. The bilateral absence of pyramidalis muscles in some individuals demonstrates that this structure is truly optional rather than simply reduced. Unlike other vestigial organs that remain present but non-functional, the pyramidalis can disappear entirely without leaving behind even a trace of its former presence. This complete elimination suggests that the muscle provides absolutely no survival advantage. Occasionally, the pyramidalis muscle can become strained or inflamed, causing lower abdominal pain that can be difficult to diagnose. People with prominent pyramidalis muscles might experience discomfort during intense abdominal exercise or following abdominal trauma. The pain can be confusing because it occurs in an area where most medical professionals don't expect to find functional muscle tissue. The study of pyramidalis muscle variation has contributed to our understanding of how evolution eliminates unnecessary structures. Rather than simply reducing non-functional organs to smaller sizes, evolution sometimes eliminates them entirely from portions of the population while maintaining them in others. This process allows natural selection to test whether complete absence causes any problems before committing to total elimination. So, whether you're lying in bed, doing gentle abdominal stretches, or simply resting your hands on your lower abdomen, remember that you might be touching a muscle that evolution is actively removing from the human species. Your pyramidalis muscle, if you have one, represents the final chapter of a biological story that's slowly coming to an end. And with that optional muscle, we've completed our tour through the evolutionary leftovers scattered throughout your body, each one a testament to the beautiful imperfection of being human. So here we are, at the end of our gentle journey through the evolutionary museum that is your body. From your plotting appendix to your optional pyramidalis muscle, from wisdom teeth that don't fit to ear muscles you can't control, you've been carrying around a collection of biological leftovers that tell the story of where humanity has been and hint at where we might be going. These aren't flaws or mistakes. They're evidence of the beautiful, messy, ongoing process of evolution that connects you to every ancestor who survived long enough to pass their genes forward. Tonight, as you settle into sleep, your body is hosting millions of years of evolutionary history. Your tailbone remembers tales that swung through ancient forests. Your goosebumps recall fur that kept your ancestors warm. Your third eyelid remnant whispers of a time when protecting your vision meant the difference between seeing predators and becoming prey. Each vestigial part is a biological fossil, preserved in flesh and bone rather than stone. What makes these useless body parts so compelling isn't just their scientific interest, but what they reveal about the nature of being human. We're all walking contradictions, carrying around evolutionary baggage that serves no purpose except to remind us that we're works in progress. Your appendix might try to kill you for no good reason. Your wisdom teeth might require surgical removal because your mouth evolved faster than your dental blueprint. Your body hair might make you itch without providing any protection. But there's something deeply comforting about sharing these imperfections with every other human being. When you get goosebumps from a beautiful piece of music, millions of tiny muscles are contracting in perfect futility, trying to fluff fur you don't have. When someone else gets the same goosebumps from the same song, their useless muscles are doing exactly the same thing. We're all equally ridiculous, all equally magnificent in our evolutionary awkwardness. These vestigial structures also remind us that evolution doesn't design organisms with foresight or purpose. Natural selection simply tinkers with existing structures, keeping what works, discarding what actively harms survival, and leaving behind what's merely unnecessary. We're not the intended end result of some grand plan. We're just the current iteration of an ongoing biological experiment that's been running for billions of years. The variation in these vestigial traits across different people provides glimpses into humanity's evolutionary future. Some people are missing their palmaris longus tendons, others lack Darwin's tubercles, and many are born without wisdom teeth. These individuals might represent the leading edge of human evolution, already adapted to a future where these structures have disappeared entirely from our species. In thousands of years, if humanity continues to evolve, future anthropologists might study the vestigial organs of 21st century humans the way we study the fossils of our ancient ancestors. They might marvel at the fact that we carried around appendices that could kill us, wisdom teeth that didn't fit our mouths, and muscles designed for ears that couldn't move and fur we didn't have. But evolution is also conservative, maintaining structures long after their usefulness expires, because eliminating them completely takes many generations and provides little survival advantage. Your vestigial organs persist because they don't actively harm you enough for natural selection to prioritize their removal. They're biological freeloaders, along for the ride in your genetic code. These useless body parts also highlight how recent and dramatic the changes in human lifestyle have been. Many of these structures became obsolete, not over millions of years, but over the relatively brief period since humans developed agriculture, cities, and technology. Evolution simply hasn't had enough time to clean up the biological debris left behind by our rapid cultural development. The medical implications of vestigial organs remind us that our bodies are still adapting to modern life. Appendicitis, wisdom tooth problems, and tailbone injuries are uniquely human ailments caused by carrying around body parts that no longer serve us. We've essentially created new categories of medical problems by evolving too quickly for our anatomy to keep up. Yet there's something poetic about these evolutionary leftovers. They're proof that you're connected to an unbroken chain of life, stretching back billions of years. Every useless part of your body tells a story about survival, adaptation, and the relentless creativity of evolutionary change. Your vestigial organs are love letters from your ancestors, biological postcards saying, "We were here, and now you are too." As you drift towards sleep tonight, remember that you're not just an individual lying in bed. You're a living library of evolutionary history. Your body contains the compressed story of life on Earth, from single cells to complex organisms, from aquatic creatures to land dwellers, from tree-climbing primates to space-traveling humans. Every useless part of you is a chapter in that ongoing story. The beautiful imperfection of carrying around evolutionary baggage connects you to every other human who has ever lived or ever will live. We're all in this together, sharing the same biological inheritance, the same useless organs, the same evolutionary quirks. In our shared imperfection, we find a kind of perfection that no intelligent design could match. So, as you close your eyes and let your mind wander toward dreams, take comfort in knowing that your body is exactly as it should be. Beautifully flawed, perfectly imperfect, and carrying within itself the entire history of life on a small planet orbiting an ordinary star. Your vestigial organs aren't mistakes. They're evidence of the magnificent, ongoing experiment of being human. Sweet dreams, and may your useless body parts rest peacefully until tomorrow, when they'll continue their quiet vigil of doing absolutely nothing perfectly. And so we reach the end of our quiet journey through the evolutionary museum housed within your own body. Remember how we started tonight, with you lying there trying to quiet your restless mind, carrying around biological leftovers from millions of years ago? Now you know the truth about those mysterious passengers you've been hosting all your life. Your appendix plotting quietly in your abdomen, your wisdom teeth crowding your jaw, your tailbone remembering the tail you never had, your body hair trying to provide warmth it cannot give. These 15 useless body parts aren't just random biological curiosities. They're proof that you're living, breathing evidence of evolution itself. Every vestigial organ tells a story about survival, adaptation, and the long, winding path that led from single-celled organisms swimming in ancient seas to you, lying in bed tonight, contemplating the beautiful imperfection of being human. What we've discovered together is that evolution doesn't design perfect organism. It tinkers with existing structures, keeping what works, slowly eliminating what doesn't, and leaving behind a fascinating collection of biological artifacts. Your body is essentially a natural history museum, where you are simultaneously the curator, the exhibit, and the visitor, carrying within yourself the compressed story of life on Earth. Think about the comfort in that shared imperfection. When you get goosebumps from a piece of music, millions of tiny muscles are contracting uselessly, trying to fluff fur you don't have. When someone across the world experiences the same emotional response to the same song, their equally useless muscles are doing exactly the same thing. We're all carrying around the same evolutionary baggage, all equally magnificent in our biological awkwardness. The science behind these vestigial structures reveals something profound about the nature of change itself. Evolution is conservative, maintaining old systems long after they've lost their purpose, because completely eliminating functional structures takes thousands of generations. Your useless body parts persist not because they serve you, but because they don't harm you enough for natural selection to prioritize their removal. This conservative approach explains why you're still carrying around an appendix that can kill you, wisdom teeth that don't fit your mouth, and muscles designed for ears that can't move. These structures represent evolution's reluctance to completely abandon successful adaptations, even when they're no longer necessary. You're witnessing evolutionary change in real time, carrying around parts that are slowly disappearing from the human species. The variation in these traits across different people provides glimpses into humanity's evolutionary future. Some people are already missing their palmaris longus tendons, others lack Darwin's tubercles, and many are born without wisdom teeth. These individuals might represent the leading edge of human evolution, already adapted to a future where these structures have disappeared entirely from our species. But perhaps the most important insight from our journey is how these useless body parts connect you to something larger than yourself. Every vestigial organ is evidence of your place in an unbroken chain of life, stretching back billions of years. Your tailbone connects you to ancestors who swung through trees with magnificent tails. Your third eyelid remnant links you to creatures who needed constant protection from flying debris. Your ear muscles remember a time when precise directional hearing meant the difference between survival and death. These biological leftovers also remind us how recent and dramatic human cultural evolution has been. Many of these structures became obsolete, not over millions of years, but over the relatively brief period since humans developed agriculture, cities, and technology. We've evolved culturally faster than our bodies could adapt, leaving us with fascinating mismatches between our ancient anatomy and our modern lifestyle. The medical implications of carrying around vestigial organs highlight this evolutionary lag. Appendicitis, wisdom tooth problems, and tailbone injuries are uniquely human ailments caused by possessing body parts that no longer serve us. We've essentially created new categories of medical problems by evolving too quickly for our anatomy to keep pace. Yet there's profound beauty in this imperfection. Your vestigial organs aren't mistakes or design flaws. They're love letters from your ancestors, biological postcards saying, "We were here, we survived long enough to pass our genes forward, and now you carry our story within your own body." Every useless part of you is a chapter in the ongoing narrative of life on Earth. As sleep approaches tonight, remember that you're not just an individual settling into bed. You're a living library of evolutionary history, carrying within yourself the compressed story of billions of years of adaptation, survival, and change. Your body contains evidence of aquatic ancestors, tree-dwelling primates, and ground-walking early humans, all contributing to the remarkable collection of biological artifacts you call yourself. So, take comfort in your beautiful imperfection. Your useless body parts connect you to every other human who has ever lived or ever will live. We're all in this together, sharing the same evolutionary inheritance, the same vestigial organs, the same biological quirks that make us uniquely, wonderfully human. If you've enjoyed this exploration of evolutionary leftovers, consider subscribing to join us for more gentle journeys through the fascinating world of biology and sleep. And I'm curious, after learning about all these useless body parts, which one surprised you most? Drop a comment and let me know which vestigial organ you found most intriguing, or share your own experiences with wisdom teeth, appendicitis, or any other evolutionary leftover that's made its presence known in your life. Sweet dreams, and may your collection of useless body parts rest peacefully until tomorrow, when they'll continue their quiet vigil of doing absolutely nothing, perfectly connecting you to the magnificent, ongoing story of human evolution.